Order. Chris Evans to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I have to say you do look remarkably like the man that I had breakfast with 45 minutes ago. I'm pleased this topic is getting the attention that it deserves. I'm grateful to be opening this important debate, especially ahead of the Less Survivable Cancers Awareness Week, which begins on the 13th of January. I have to confess, Mr. Weston, I knew relatively little about the effects of brain cancer until I met my constituent, Ellie James. Ellie has travelled from Wales today. She's in the gallery with us. And I have to tell her today, I admire how tirelessly she has campaigned in memory of her late husband, Owain. It is Owain who has brought us all here today. Owain passed away from glioblastoma, the most common type of malignant brain tumour in adults, in June of 2024. He was just 34 years of age. Since then, Ellie has been campaigning for what she calls Owain's Law to be implemented in this country. Owain was young, fit, healthy, and had his whole life ahead of him. He leaves behind a family, including a young daughter. Owain's story highlights the importance of informed consent from patients and their families regarding treatment and the storage of their brain tissue. Owain was diagnosed with a brain tumour in September 2022. Half of Owain's 14-centimetre tumour was surgically removed, but only 1 centimetre of the removed tissue was stored fresh or flash frozen. The 1 centimetre was used to treat Owain with a form of immunotherapy, treatment that requires the patient's frozen tissue. Owain received 3 rounds of the vaccine before the frozen tissue ran out, at which point further surgery was not considered possible, and the remaining 6 centimetres of tissue was stored in paraffin, making it unsuitable for additional vaccines. Owain died a few months later, despite his cancer showing signs of regression during the treatment. If all of the removed tissue was fresh frozen, around 30 vaccines could have been created. If Owain and his family had been more informed of the practices surrounding brain tissue, freezing and storage, and if the hospital had chosen the flash freezing method for all of the removed tissue, instead of keeping it in paraffin, Owain could still be with us. Owain's story is truly devastating. But what most stood out to me was that it was a real, achievable potential to extend, if not save, his life. The amount of grief that Ellie and Owain's family face must be tremendous and unimaginable. However, out of grief, great change can take place. And I pay tribute to Ellie for her determination to turn her unimaginable grief into something positive that can help others. Mr. Weston, there is currently no consistent national guidance or sufficient infrastructure to ensure that brain tumour tissue removed during surgery can be stored in the fresh, frozen state required for advanced therapies such as immunotherapy and cancer research. It is fundamentally wrong that Owain and his family only learned of the small proportion of tissue initially frozen once the vaccines ran out. I am sure they are not the only people this will have happened to. For every patient diagnosed with a less survivable cancer, the average 1-year survival rate is 42%. This is in comparison to a 1-year survival rate of 70% for all cancers. Statistics like this need to improve, and there are procedures surrounding brain tissue freezing which can be changed, which would have an undeniable positive impact on survival rates. There are already groups doing research and drawing attention to what can be done to improve outcomes for people with cancer, such as the APPG on less survivable cancers. There are also charities like Cancer Research and Macmillan who conduct valuable research and support patients of cancer and their families. Again, I pay tribute to them. There are, however, specific recommendations that I would like to mention, which link specifically to Owain, but also many others who face similar situations. The NHS needs appropriate medical freezers to store fresh frozen tissue. In many cases, there is not enough freezer space to facilitate this type of brain tissue freezing. This must change. This would be a long-term investment which would save lives.
But the Honourable Member Gibran,
Sure.
brain Cancer is one of the deadliest cancers, we know that, but it also disproportionately seems to affect young adults. It's the biggest cancer killer of people under 40. So would the honourable member agree that not only would this save lives at a relatively small cost, but there's an economic benefit too, because the Brain Tumour Charity points out that most people diagnosed have to give up work, but so do their carers. 70% of carers also have to give up work to look after those afflicted. So there's an economic benefit to do this at a relatively low cost, but also, of course, it would save lives.
I think the Honourable Lady is absolutely right, and I think what we have to remember in this is when somebody is diagnosed with cancer, the cancer doesn't just affect them personally, it also affects their family and their loved ones. And she's absolutely right to say a lot of people have to leave work to care for those people as well, and the emotional impact that they have to deal with as well. And I think she's absolutely right on the economic point that she raises as well. And also the wider point as well. We lead the world in life sciences at the moment. If we did this, we could be a world leader in this as well as saving lives. I think it's a win-win all around for everybody. As the Honourable Lady said, the change is cost-effective. It is estimated that it cost £250,000 to £400,000 to ensure all NHS trusts have the necessary capacity and capabilities of flash freezing, so that every brain cancer patient can potentially access the latest treatments, research, and the most accurate genome sequencing techniques. In Owen's case, there was enough freezer space. It was a conscious decision to store Owen's tissue in paraffin, not one out of necessity. That is why attitudes and established guidance protocol within the NHS regarding brain tissue freezing also need to change. It should not be the norm to store removed brain tissue in something that makes it unusable for further research or treatment. I hope the Minister will commit to establishing national standards so that every suitable brain tumour sample is frozen as a matter of routine. A brain tumour, Mr Weston, can happen to anyone and could affect us or any of our loved ones. This change needs to happen now to save lives in the future. This needs to happen for people like Owen, who are no longer with us, for people who are currently unwell with brain cancer, and for people who will fortunately become ill in the future. This Labour government has a real opportunity to enact meaningful, positive and feasible change. We must seize that, especially if it's achievable and affordable. As I've said before in the earlier intervention, we lead the world in life sciences, and this is something we can be world leaders in, and it's something we can be proud to be world leaders in. The National Cancer Plan, which will be published next month, must address the storage of brain tissue. Specifically, it must outline exactly how it will improve outcomes for patients with less survivable cancers. If we are serious about putting patients at the heart of cancer care, improving their awareness on storage of their own tissue is one of the simplest places to start. The way treatment is allocated is also deeply unfair. The postcode lottery on cancer treatment must end. Your ability to access cancer treatment being dependent on where you live is wrong. 40% of people with cancer in the UK have struggled to access treatment or care because of where they live. That is ineffective, unfair and discriminatory. These are not the values that a Labour government should uphold. For the cost of a few £100s, we could eliminate this postcode lottery affecting brain cancer patients. We need to ensure that all types of treatment, including experimental ones, involving freezers and vaccines, can succeed from all areas, not only some. This is an exceptionally small investment for such a potentially life-saving impact. But it's not only treatment, Mr Weston, which is affected by current protocol, but research too. Owen's tissue was no longer suitable for research because of the way it was stored in paraffin. It is also incredibly difficult to have control over your own tissue post-extraction. There's constant confusion over who technically owns it, making it challenging for people like Ellie to retrieve the remaining tissue for further testing or research. We need to stop putting unnecessary barriers in place. We are making things harder than they need to be, and these practices have a direct impact on people's everyday lives. It is just as alarming that all this is done without any informed consent from the patient or their families. The importance of the storage method for brain tissue cannot be understated when someone's life relies upon it. Brain cancer patients and their families should have absolute right to be consulted on and give informed consent on how their tumour is stored. Whilst we have the opportunity to make these changes, in the National Cancer Plan in England, we must do so. It is a small, affordable change that could have a huge impact and improve cancer treatment nationwide. I know this was debated in the Welsh Senate in July, and I wonder if the Minister could liaise with the Welsh Government about introducing a similar plan. I understand the Minister said there that they were not minded to introduce legislation. I was wondering in bilateral meetings whether she could bring this topic up with him at some point. Also, I was hoping that I could have a commitment from the Minister today to meet with me and my constituent, Ellie, so she can explain in detail what her husband Owain's experience and discuss how we can prevent this from happening to current and future patients. In matters of great importance like this, Mr. Weston, patients must be aware of what's happening to their tissue during treatment and afterwards. Families should be able to access their tissue if needed for future testing and research. I urge the Minister to think of real people like Owain, Ellie, and the young daughter whose lives could be so different now. If the patients were consulted on, if the tissue was stored differently, if there were more medical freezers, I would specifically like to know the government's plans regarding brain tissue freezing and the impact that we have on diagnostics, treatment and research, and if the government plans to invest in freezer capacity, and does the government intend to make flash freezing the norm? I would like to say this at the end, that whilst brain tumours will continue to happen to people like Owain, or anyone in this room, diagnostics, treatment and research can get better. The government can lead the way and begin to change the attitudes and practices surrounding brain tissue freezing. In fact, we must do so. I wish not to hear of another story like Owain's and Ellie's, which has been absolutely tragic. I want Ellie's campaign to succeed, and I know it can and must. Owain was someone whose outcomes could have been different if the established guidance protocol was different. And that is the most devastating thing. And perhaps if these things had happened, Mr. Weston, Owain could have been sitting with Ellie in the public gallery today. Thank you so much.
I remind members that if they wish to be called in this debate, they should bob. Thank you. The question is that this House has considered patient access to tissue freezing for advanced brain cancer treatment, diagnostics and research. Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I thank you, the member, quite carefully for bringing this debate, and I thank Ellie for all her work, and Hugh and others who really are pulling very hard on this issue. So many thanks indeed. I want to try and take this debate a little bit broader in two directions. One is starting with, well, frankly, my sister, Georgie, who also has a GBM, a glioblastoma, and was diagnosed 2.5 years ago and has been incredibly brave and incredibly determined, working with the Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden to really try and get more brain cancer justice, and with Ellie, and driving that debate. But, and that also applies to so many people in my constituency of Witney, which also have got, yes, brain tumours, but also tumours of all sorts of different types of cancers. And I really think we ought to be considering two things here. One is, and I really ask the Minister to consider this, to be taking this tumour tissue freezing as standard to all cancerous tumour tissues, not just brain, because I think it is inequitable just to be focusing on, however close it is to my heart, just on brain. I think it has to be trying to get all tumour tissues frozen as standard, and the economies of scale of doing that obviously make sense. So that would be one thing. The other thing is to really look at, once we've stored that tissue, is about how we have access to that tissue and how we have equitable and public health-oriented access to the tissue, which we are, as a country, massively failing on. So I'm looking and asking the Minister to consider reforming the Health Tissue Act 2004, which could be broadened as to what's legally permitted in research contexts. And what that would do, would have explicit legal pathways for retrospective clinical samples. That would allow clinical tissue, biopsies, diagnostic archives to be routinely made available for public health research under clear safeguards without separate project-by-project consent. That's one. Secondly, simplify requirements for de-identified tissues. clarify that truly anonymised, non-identifiable samples can be used without consent or HTA, Health Tissue Act, licence for a wider range of research, not just narrowly defined exceptions. Thirdly, convert licences to broader authorisations. Instead of licence for each tissue bank, allow accredited biobanks to supply samples under nationally recognised frameworks. And fourthly, rework DNA analysis rules. Reduce barriers for genomic public health research by redefining or narrowing the offence of having tissue for DNA analysis, provided strong data protection is ensured. So that's one big chunk. The second big chunk is, and there are only two, is I'm also asking that we reform the HTA, the Human Tissue Act 2004, to apply a similar default system that we now use nationally for organ donation for tumour tissue data. To do this, Parliament would need to amend the HTA 2004 to introduce deemed consent regime for residual tumour tissue and derived data. This would be limited to public interest cancer research with a statutory and simple opt-out, strict purpose limits, and enhanced oversight by the Human Tissue Authority. The model would mirror the Organ Donation Deemed Consent Act 2019, but apply just to data derived primarily from tumour tissue. So in plain English, what does that mean? It means that we've got something that works for organ donations, yeah? And that is saving lives day in, day out. That means that if any of us die, our organs are taken, and then our next of kin can opt out if they choose. The great majority of people do not opt out. That means that there's been many more organs available, and that has saved lives. Frankly, tumour tissue, somebody may want to, dispose of their tumour tissue, but the great majority of us do not, we would want that used for public health and public science. So having that as an automatic, yes.
Sorry to stop. I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and sorry to stop you mid-flow, which I think is a really, really interesting concept. I'll just draw my honourable friend's attention to the BBC article today, which talks about using centuries-old samples of tumours from bowel cancer in order to work out why there is such a massive increase in bowel cancer amongst young people. So surely this is a step forward, and I don't understand the science on it, but surely this is a step forward for our research as well.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. And that speaks to the point, because, of course, those people have been dead many centuries, but we do believe it's worth being able to access that information. And at the moment, that information is not accessible in most cases. So that's something that we really, really want to change. And I look over at Denmark's registry-first legal architecture with mandatory health registries covering cancer diagnoses, pathology, genomics and treatment and outcomes. And the Danish Cancer Registry automatically records tumour data, covers the entire population, and is used for research, oversight and quality improvement. Participation is automatic with opt-outs rather than consent-based. Our government is seeking to rapidly expand our national genomics capabilities, and I applaud the government for that. But without far better, more sensible access to the base tissue with appropriate safeguards, then there is no genomics-based population-wide health service. Thank you.
McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. Debates on brain tumours are a bit like buses. There are none for ages, and then they all come one after the other. I'd like to thank the member for Cabilly for organising this debate, the second of two debates on consecutive days. I'd like to send my condolences to Ellie and her entire family on the death of Owen, and I think, like a number of people in this room, I understand some of what she's experienced. And Mr. Weston, I have to inform you that there is a former Labour MP who is close to dying of a glioblastoma, another politician, after Tessa Jowl and after my sister Margaret. And I want to ask the question, when do we intervene to do something about this rather than talk about it? I'm supportive of any measure that genuinely improves patient outcomes for glioblastoma patients. Anything that increases survival of this devastating disease is worth supporting. But in my own experience, working closely with clinicians and supporting my late sister through her glioblastoma treatment, the most effective way to improve outcomes for patients with brain tumours is by accessing clinical drug trials. Without trials, there is no route to better treatments, no lifeline, and for too many patients, no pathway at all. I think we can all agree that the number of clinical trials underway for brain tumours is entirely inadequate. It is impossible to justify that since 2008, the National Institute of Health Research has invested just £13.2 million towards brain tumour research, and none of the funding to date has supported using repurposed drugs, using some of the immunotherapy drugs that are changing the face of the larger cancers and its outcome.
Will my honourable friend give way on the topic of trials and research? I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I just wanted to quickly pay tribute to my constituent Alex Davis, who sadly passed away last November, the day after his 50th birthday. 2 years after his glioblastoma diagnosis, he's survived by his wife Emma and their 2 daughters. Now, Alex volunteered to have his brain tissue frozen after 2 surgeries for ongoing research at the Christie Hospital in Manchester. So, does she agree with me that it's the government's national cancer plan that should include more better used funding for research and more clinical trials, particularly for poorly understood cancers like glioblastoma that she has campaigned tenaciously on over many, many years?
Can I thank the honourable member for his intervention? He is absolutely right. Let us be absolutely clear. There is no route for an improvement in any of the rare cancers unless there are more trials, and the system mitigates against it. There is a lot of talk at the moment about the government of stakeholders. The stakeholders involved in drug trials, the major pharma companies and the major cancer charities, do not get involved in these trials because for pharma there's no money in it, and for the big charities there seems to be more interest in primary science and mice work than there is in using some of these amazing drugs to find out if they can provide some sort of support to people with rare cancers. It's the lack of treatment options, this inaction, that led me, alongside my sister's extraordinary network of friends and supporters, to launch our own trial in her memory. Because when the system does not move quickly enough, patients and families are forced to take matters into their own hands. We have an established clinical trial now underway at UCLH with encouraging early indicators, a wider trial programme mapped out, and further trials ready to follow with protocols written. What we are seeking is to clarify on how to secure the funding needed to repeat and extend this work using alternative drugs so that more patients can benefit. We continue to raise funds to support that goal.
Member for giving way. Would she agree with me that yesterday when she was speaking, she outlined the tremendous work was being done to raise, I think it was about £1 million privately for research, that needs to be supplemented and complemented by statutory funding in order to make the dramatic difference that she and hopefully all of us agree needs to happen?
Can I completely agree with the honourable member? Anything that we have raised, £1 million over 2 years, is a drop in the ocean. It's an important drop in the ocean, and it has led to action, which is what we need. But in the longer term, it has to be the government, it has to be the pharmaceuticals that are intervened on to make progress.
may I pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden for everything she is doing on glioblastoma. Yeah. It's affected my own family. My brother-in-law, Pip Harding, was diagnosed with a glioblastoma, and he's received oncothermia therapy, but only through crowdfunding. And the cost of, I don't know, I think it was 10 treatments, was something like £40,000 that he got from his friends and family. Now, that shows the generosity of the public, but also how interested the public are in this. So I would ask the government, does my honourable friend agree with me, that we should be asking the government to match the public spirit on this?
Yeah. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member and thank her for all the work she does, and it's absolutely thrilling to hear that her brother-in-law has made such progress with the Oncotherm machine. The Oncotherm machine is in the UK because my sister raised the funds to bring it over, but it cannot go into an NHS hospital because it couldn't get MHRA approval. So it is, as she rightly says, for people who can raise the money to access it. And in the treatment in this world, 40,000 is a lot of money, but it's only a fraction of what other treatments are possibly out there, that people sell their homes, spend their pensions and leave themselves completely bankrupt on the death of a loved one. And this is the kind of it's the Wild West out there, as I know that she knows. So I said, we've established a trial at UCLH, and we have encouraging early indicators, but we need to do so much more. Our hope is to do 10 trials with repurposed drugs, and we want to clarify how a bid can be made to the UNHR to actually look for this money. We are not the only people doing this. We are not exceptional. Those people, those patients, those families who see the lack of alternatives, as the Honourable Member said in her intervention, are getting involved and are raising money. But anything we can raise falls into insignificance in comparison to what the government or Big Pharma can do. I mean, how is it that the last government, in good faith, can have given the UNHR £40 million on Tessa Giles' death for research, and none of it to have been spent on testing out repurposed drugs? So I'm grateful in yesterday's debate that the Minister highlighted the letter that I received from the head of the NIHR, Lucy Chappell, setting out the routes for funding and how they can be accessed. I went back as a result of that debate to read the letter, and it doesn't take us any further. It is still impossible to navigate in any effective way. And so I thank her for her commitment to provide further guidance. I don't want this just to be for me or the work that I do or what Dr Mulholland does at UCLH. I want to encourage all the flowers to bloom, because somebody may actually hit on the progress that we need. But even when you have an experienced clinical team with an established research base, the process is complex, fragmented and difficult to navigate. If this is challenging for a clinical team of major London teaching hospitals, I worry deeply about how many other clinical teams without the same visibility or support will simply fall away before a trial even has the chance to begin. So I ask the Minister this: will she consider how clearer, more navigable routes to accessing this funding can be set out and provide clearer direction so that the money committed by the government can reach the trials patients so urgently needed?
Jim Shannon.
Under your chairship, and can I thank the Honourable Member for Caerphilly for setting the scene so incredibly well, and for the Honourable Lady for all that she does. I was impressed by her yesterday and in relation to her contribution and today, and that has been equalled. I don't think any of us hasn't known someone who has been touched by it. A close friend of mine whose youngest daughter was diagnosed with glioblastoma last Christmas. She died a few weeks later. The diagnosis at that time, Mr. Chairman, was bleak, and the lives of my friend and his wife are changed forever. And bleak doesn't even come close to the sense of loss.
The member give way. Thank the honourable member for giving way. Would agree with me that each of us in our constituencies, and I know I had some personal experience of a very young constituent who had lost her father for the exact same reason, and it has a trauma that affects not just the immediate family but those close friends, and it lives with them for years. And hopefully we can see some progress both today and the next few weeks whenever the cancer issue is addressed in the main chamber, that will address this in a way that people will see progress being made.
I thank my honourable friend for the intervention. This has made this debate that more impactful for me and for all of us. My friend was a veteran. He served in the forces, great courage. The shoulders was brought as a rugby player and a man that could take on anything. But he let his life on the line for my freedom and for everyone here, and yet could do nothing. Excuse me. But watch.
Can I say that he has been very kind to me in all these debates and called me soft-hearted. I think that maybe, if I am soft-hearted, then perhaps that includes both of us.
Well, we're both soft-hearted, and probably many others in this chamber are soft-hearted as well. But it just makes me think of a man who was so strong, and when his wee daughter died, life became very, very focused upon that, and it will always be focused on that, and the Honourable is right to say that. I can understand how Owen's Law has come to light, because families are determined to ensure that their devastation is not replicated again. If one single thing can be done to prevent it, and that person epitomises for me, and to the audience as well, we thank them for being here. But it's really important that we put this on. And what do we do? Mr. Chairman, we can do things, and Owen's Law, which we've got the paperwork outside there, would be an indication of what we could do. Tissue freezing preserves the DNA, meaning that without this key, simple and cost-effective steps, patients cannot access the latest cancer treatments, diagnostics and research. There's a way forward. I'm very pleased, I'm always pleased, Mr. Chairman, to see the Minister in place, and she knows that. We're all very fond of her, and we understand that this Minister understands things better than most, and because we all know the circumstances. But I'm looking forward to her response to us and the ask that the Honourable Member for Caerphilly has put forward, and that everyone else is asking the same thing. Patients cannot access the latest cancer treatments, diagnostics and research. To help end this preventable postcode lottery, please consider entering the current ballot for health and social care questions, which closes on the 7th of January, which we all know is today. So if you can get your question in before 12 o'clock today, that would be good. Yeah. And maybe next week then we'll have an opportunity to ask it on the floor of the House. Yeah. To help prevent more brain cancer patients in your constituency and my constituency from missing out. In the NHS, most brain cancer patient samples are stored in paraffin wax rather than being flash frozen in medical freezers. When this happens, patients lose access to potentially life-saving neuro treatments developing using these samples. More precise diagnostics methods and advanced research, including future testing to find out if a patient's condition is genetic and likely to be passed on to their children. That's also important in the lives we lead. There's things that are hereditary that come from your mum and dad, maybe your grandparents, down to our family, and possibly may even pass on to those who come after us. Ellie's campaign, and we thank them for that wee paper beforehand. It really does help us to understand things just that wee bit better. I know the Minister has seen that, and the Minister has seen the 3 questions for the Minister. I don't think I need to repeat them, Mr. Chairman, because I think the Minister is probably very, very aware of what they are. But the point I'm making is those are the requests that we would wish to see. I have a couple of requests of my own, which wouldn't be a surprise to anyone in this chamber, and certainly not to the Minister. but new research from the Tessa Giles brain cancer mission shows that access to tissue freezing varies dramatically between trusts, meaning eligibility for advanced treatments can depend entirely on where a patient lives. The postcode lottery is preventing my constituents in Strangford in Northern Ireland from benefiting from more precise whole genome sequencing, personalised immunotherapy and cutting-edge diagnostic options. And my constituents are not the only ones affected. Everyone here and everyone who's not here are affected by it. I received some information, Mr Chairman, which indicates an estimation that for just 250,000 to 400,000, every brain cancer patient in the UK could have routine access to tissue freezing by default, unlocking the treatments the government has committed to delivering. So my first question to the Minister, for myself personally, and the Owens Law and the three questions that they've put are the three important ones, is can we look at this, or can the Minister look at this as one of the requests that we can look forward to? When we look to this debate and what we're trying to achieve, I think it's important that we have some goals, and I know the Minister will always, she always does, replies very helpfully and positively to us. So that's my first question. In Northern Ireland, funding for freezing brain tissue is primarily tied to research initiatives rather than standard patient care. A local charity called Brainwaves NI is currently funding a pilot scheme at the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust and Queen's University in Belfast. Their project uses rapid nanopore sequencing. I don't pretend to understand what all these things are, Mr Chairman. I'm not a medical person. I'm just an MP who tries to represent his constituents when he can. But it requires specialised tissue handling, often involving freezing to reduce diagnosis times from weeks to hours. So it's clear from this debate today, from every person who's made a contribution and everyone who will make a contribution as well, those who have personal knowledge, that there should not be pilots, but a more equitable access to this tissue freezing throughout the United Kingdom. And I support the member for Caerphilly today in those very calls that he has made so very well on behalf of his constituents and indeed on behalf of all the United Kingdom as well. Glioblastoma is a death sentence, and tissue freezing could unlock this sentence. And it is, I believe, right and proper that we do all we can to see this in all of the United Kingdom. So, Minister, my last question and request to yourself as Minister is, could I ask that the Minister could liaise with all the regional administrations, Scotland, Wales, and in particular Northern Ireland and the Assembly? Brain cancer affects us all. It doesn't stop at the border with Scotland and England or the Irish Sea. It's all of us together. So I believe that we need to work together to find a way of funding a cure for advanced brain cancer treatment. And with that, I look forward very much, Mr Chairman, to the Minister's response. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr West. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Can I start by saying how honoured I am to follow the Honourable Member for Strangford, who demonstrates so ably that high-minded ideals of representation, compassion and decency run right through this place, perhaps more often than it's fully recognised, and I thank him for his contribution. Can I also thank the Honourable Member for Caerphilly for securing this important debate, and to your constituent Ellie for her campaigning. I can say without hesitation you have another signed-up supporter of Owen's Law here today in me. Because as the Honourable Member for Caerphilly demonstrated, MPs do not generally come to these debates to have abstract policy discussions. They come here to do what is our most important job, which is to be the voice of our constituents. So that's where I want to start, to share the experience of my constituent, Samantha Jones, who came to see me alongside her father-in-law, Gary Jones, following the death of her husband, Trevor, from glioblastoma. Trevor was just 41 years old when he suddenly became ill on Christmas Day 2024. Until that moment, there had been no warning signs and no symptoms that anyone could reasonably have recognised. Tests revealed stage 4 glioblastoma, and he was given 6 months to live. He lived for 9, and he died in September 2025. And like so many families confronted with this diagnosis, they were plunged into a world of shock, fear, and urgent decision-making. A biopsy was taken, which confirmed and sequenced the cancer, and at that point the family believed that everything possible was being done. It was only later, through Samantha's own research and conversations with an oncologist experienced in international practice, that they learned something that they found deeply, deeply troubling. There were treatments that may have been available to Trevor on the basis of his biopsy, but which could not be used because the tissue sample had not been flash frozen. Instead, as is standard practice in much of the UK, the biopsy had been stored in paraffin blocks, as we've heard from the Honourable Member from Caerphilly this morning. By the time the family discovered the significance of this, it was too late. Trevor was too ill to undergo another biopsy, too unwell to travel and unable to take part in clinical trials. Samantha told me that in Germany, brain tumour biopsies are flash frozen as a matter of course. This allows them far more advanced genomic and molecular testing and can open the door to a wider range of treatments. In the UK, by contrast, this is done only if it's specifically requested or if the patient is part of a clinical trial. For families who have just been told that their loved one has an aggressive and terminal brain cancer, this is not a realistic expectation. They are in shock. They are terrified. They are placing their trust in the system to do everything it can, without knowing that one unmade request could close off future options entirely. This raises a simple but profound question that I do put to the Minister today. Why does the NHS not routinely flash freeze all brain biopsy, tumour biopsies as standard practice? What can we do to change that here and now? I'm not suggesting false hope. I fully recognise that glioblastoma remains a devastating diagnosis with limited treatment options. But when options are already so few, it cannot be right that patients are denied even the possibility of certain treatments because of how their tissue samples were stored. This is also an issue of fairness and equality. Access to the best possible diagnostics and research pathways should not depend on geography, chance, or whether a family happened to know the right question to ask at the worst moment in their lives. Samantha and Gary came to see me not only in grief, but with a determination, one reflected by Ellie here this morning, that something good might come from their devastating experience. They want other families to be spared the same sense of missed opportunity and unanswered questions. More broadly, brain cancers remained under-recognised, underfunded, compared with other forms of cancer, despite their severity and poorer outcomes. If we are serious about improving survival, treatment and research, we must be willing to look honestly at current practice and ask whether it is good enough, because I think the consensus is that it is not. I hope the Minister will engage constructively on this issue and consider whether making the flash freezing of brain tumour biopsies standard practice across the NHS, because that could improve patient access to treatment, strengthen research and offer families reassurance that everything possible is being done. For Trevor, such a change has come too late, but for future patients, it does not have to. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Mr Weston, and I thank the Honourable Member for Caerphilly for securing this very important debate today, and all of the other Honourable Members who have contributed so far today. I'd also like to highlight the incredible work done by the Campaign for Owen's Law. You are doing a most remarkable campaign. Owen was diagnosed with a grade 4 tumour in 2022, sadly died in 2024. Despite showing success, Owen stopped receiving effective treatment as not enough of his brain tissue was frozen to make further immunotherapy vaccines. Owen's wife Ellie is calling for fair and equal access to brain tissue freezing, enabling every patient to access new treatments and research. The government needs to listen to the campaign, to act and invest in brain tumour freezing so that we can start to save more lives. Brain cancer is already the biggest killer for people under 40, and 45% of brain cancers are diagnosed in an emergency setting, meaning that the cancer has progressed untreated and the patient is more likely to are more unlikely to tolerate treatment. With so many factors affecting survival outcomes for brain cancer patients, the government needs to start improving treatment for brain cancer now. Most brain cancer patients in Wokingham cannot access advanced technologies like personalised immunotherapy cancer treatments that rely on frozen tissue. Both the Royal Berkshire Trust and the Frimley NHS Foundation Trust do not have any medical grade freezers suitable for storing tissue samples and have no access to rapid freezing equipment suitable for brain tissue. This needs to change. The cost of providing the right freezers would be a small cost to each hospital trust. And I would add that I entirely agree with my honourable friend, the member for Witney, and others who have called today for the ability for other tissues to be frozen, not just brain tissue. Like many other members today, I'm really pleased to see the Minister here in her place. I have a very simple question. Can I ask that the Minister confirms that equal access to high-quality tissue storage pathways will be addressed in the upcoming National Cancer Plan? Thank you.
Well done.
Just point of clarification, I mixed up my quangos. In the response to the intervention by the member for Esher and Walton, I suggested that it was the MHRA's fault that the Oncotherm machine was not in an NH hospital. It is, of course, NICE's fault that it isn't in an NHS hospital. I wouldn't want anybody to think that that machine doesn't have the approved registration of the MHRA.
Thank you. Your point of order is noted. Helen Maguire.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Mr Weston, and I thank my honourable friend for Caerphilly for securing this very important debate on equitable access of tissue freezing for brain cancer. My constituent's son was first diagnosed at the age of 10 with a very rare brain tumour. When he should have been playing with friends and going to school, he underwent surgery and intense radiotherapy. After treatment, he returned to normality, but 13 years later, the tumour recurred and he received the same treatment. Earlier this year, at 28 years old, just 3.5 years after his last treatment, it was back again. Further radiotherapy was not safe, so he underwent 6 months of chemotherapy. His mum told me about the devastation of undergoing chemotherapy, knowing it was never going to be a cure and that the tumour is expected to recur. In the 18 years he's been living with the diagnosis and undergoing treatments, there has been no progress in treatment options and a cure has not been found. My constituent is sadly not alone. 13,000 people a year are diagnosed by this brutal condition. Like many, I was struck by the story of Owain, who was diagnosed with a 14 centimetre grade 4 brain tumour in his right frontal lobe. Similarly to my constituent, Owain was told that the standard treatment of radiotherapy and chemotherapy could only hold the tumour back for a period of time until he sadly died. Owain's campaign, now run in his legacy by his brilliant wife, Ellie, here today, has exposed the lack of communication, clarity and consistency in brain tissue freezing. Fresh tissue freezing can help deliver personalised treatments, research and diagnostics, but across the country there is unequal access. Brain cancers are difficult enough to tackle, even when tumours are surgically removed. Cancer cells that have already infiltrated the brain often cause a tumour to regrow, sometimes within just months. We know that current drug treatments struggle to have an impact on the tumour mass, and radiotherapy can only delay recurrence. Consistent access to brain tumour storage across the country could help save future lives and improve outcomes for existing patients. A recent study by specialists from the Department of Neurosurgery at King's College Hospital and Guy's Cancer Centre aimed to implement a robust pathway where tumour tissue can be stored as a fresh frozen sample. Their report concluded that whilst the implementation of this pathway appeared to be straightforward, the limiting factor was requiring a fridge. There was also difficulties in liaising with the multiple teams, which was very time-consuming, and disagreements about who should actually fund the freezer. These concerns have been reflected by the charity Brain Cancer Research, which highlighted the variations in basic infrastructure to support brain tissue freezing. The Test-Agile Brain Cancer Mission has also noted the numerous barriers to genome sequencing, which requires tissue freezing to enable precise diagnosis, prognosis and tailored treatments. We are therefore not struggling with unknown barriers. The solutions are right in front of us, and when you're battling brain cancer, every day counts. Because of the lack of communication with Owain, there wasn't enough tissue frozen appropriately to create the vaccines needed to help tackle his tumour. Now his young daughter Amelia must grapple with life without Dad. This government has an opportunity to finally make a real difference to the thousands of people affected by brain cancer by ending the postcode lottery of cancer treatments. The Conservatives spent 14 years failing to make any progress on improving cancer outcomes, and now it's time for action. The Liberal Democrats urge the government to pay close attention to the specific difficulties facing brain cancer patients in the delayed National Cancer Plan. This includes setting out tangible improvements for brain cancer patients and equitable access to tissue freezing. We also cannot ignore that quick access to treatment saves lives, which is why I once again call on the government to make sure that 100% of patients start treatment within 62 days from urgent referral. There can be no more families torn apart, left in the dark or blocked from possible treatments. With the UK lagging severely behind our peers and cancer outcomes, it's time the government turns around the failure of improving cancer outcomes of the last Conservative government and finally places the UK as a global leader in cancer research and outcomes.
Hear, hear. Opposition spokesperson Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Weston, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this morning. I'd like to thank the member for Caerphilly for securing this debate and also the cancer charities, including Brain Tumour Research and Brain Tumour Charity, who provide invaluable support to my constituents, and also to Owen's family for their important campaign. I'd also like to recognise the contribution of the member for Mitcham and Morden, who has shown such incredible energy and dedication to this cause over the last few years, and so impressive to have managed to get a trial up and running herself. It offers real hope to people, and I'd like to thank her for that work. Chair, each year sees around 13,000 new cases of brain and central nervous system cancer and 5,500 deaths. As has been said already this morning, brain cancers are the leading cause of cancer-related death for those under the age of 40. As a doctor and as a granddaughter, I've witnessed the devastation that brain cancers can exact on patients and on their loved ones. Despite advances in detection, neurosurgery and radiotherapy, the mortality for brain cancers has barely changed since 2000, whereas the most common cancers have seen substantial decreases over the same period. Demographics are working against us, for epidemiological modelling indicates that a quarter of the growth in brain cancer cases can be attributed to population ageing, a pattern that's expected to continue in the coming decades. Research published last year found that in England, the median survival for patients with a glioblastoma was 7 months, that it rose to 16 months for patients with the most aggressive treatments. The reason these patients survived longer is because they had access to personalised treatments, experimental drugs or trial pathways, and much of that begins with tissue freezing. 2 people may be diagnosed with glioblastoma, but their underlying genetics can be completely different. Frozen tissue enables a pathologist to undertake gold standard genomic sequencing, which not only leads to a more precise diagnosis, but helps doctors predict how a tumour is likely to behave, identify more personalised treatment strategies based on the genetic mutations driving the tumour, and determine if the patient will be able to benefit from clinical trials that are available. Unfortunately, as we've heard, access to genomic sequencing is characterised by stark geographic inequality. High-volume specialist centres, typically in urban areas, are more likely to have established tissue freezing and integrated genomic diagnosis than centres serving more rural communities. A report by the Test-Agile Centre of Excellence found that a nearly 300% increase in whole genome sequencing activity since 2021, and around 3 in 10 NHS centres within its network were still not requesting it. And among centres that do freeze tissue, the activity rates vary from actually 0 samples to several hundred, and diagnostic times are worsening. The median time from tissue collection to final integrated molecular diagnosis in 2024 was 21 days, whereas the benchmark is 14 and only a 30% met that. Can the Minister please say what she's intending to do to improve that speed? Tissue freezing is a basic requirement for advanced testing, but every year thousands of patients' tissue samples are soaked in formaldehyde and embedded in wax blocks. Under low FFPE or formalin-fixed paraffin-embedded tissue preservation has been used in pathology labs since the earliest 20th century. It is not adequate for molecular work because it causes the cross-linking and fragmentation of nucleic acids and protein, meaning that any DNA or RNA that is extracted is degraded and often unsuitable for genomic sequencing and for creating those important personalised cancer therapies. FFPE has been described as suboptimal by the British Neuro-Oncology Society. It results in patients locked out of cutting-edge treatments regardless of clinical suitability, with knock-on effects on patient outcomes and the pace of scientific research. Can the Minister explain why FFPE rather than tissue freezing is still determining access to personalised brain cancer treatment for some NHS patients? The Government's 10-year health plan anticipates that by 2035, half of all healthcare interactions will be informed by genomics. It is a bold ambition, but the contributions in today's debate show that there is a gap between where ministers want to be and where we are at the moment. In response to a written parliamentary question, the Government acknowledged that information on the number of NHS trusts in England that have the facilities for fresh freezing of brain cancer tissue samples is not currently collected. This is a serious problem, Chair, because without the data, it's difficult for members and cancer charities to ascertain if progress is being made and for the Minister to make progress on delivery. So can the Minister confirm whether her department has plans to start collecting this information? And if it doesn't, why not? Patients should always be fully informed before they have treatment, and it's been disturbing to hear today that some patients have not been given all the information, particularly what's happening to the tissue afterwards and the potential consequences for it. So what is the Government doing to improve the consent process in these cases to ensure that patients are fully informed before the biopsy, what's happening to their tissue, and that they're given the choice? Sometimes we've heard that only a small percentage of the tissue is frozen, limiting the treatment options available. Could the Minister talk about why she understands that to be the case and what she's doing to improve the proportion that is frozen? Every trust taking brain cancer samples must have the capacity and facilities to freeze their tissue that they obtain. Mr. Chair, we're all waiting for the delayed cancer plan, which we're expecting to be on World Cancer Day, and I've said before that I think delaying it for presentational purposes is wrong, but I hope that it will be there soon. Can the Minister confirm that delivering fully informed consent, providing the necessary capability, both human resource and equipment required for freezing, and that they will ensure the research landscape improves, both in terms of ease of access and financial metrics to encourage UK research investment, will occur in the cancer plan that she has written? Mr. Chair, we all in this House want treatments to improve. We all want a cure to be found. And I know that the Minister herself is hugely committed to this and is working hard on it. And I'm interested to hear her response and to see as soon as possible the cancer plan that she's been working on.
Minister,
Thank you, Mr Weston. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I thank my honourable friend, the member for Caerphilly, and all honourable members for their contributions, many of which have been deeply personal and moving. And I thank all of honourable members for their courage and for their soft-heartedness, which has brought such compassion and insight to this debate today. Let me say how sorry I was to hear about the loss of Owain at just 34 years old. His story reminds us that many people are losing their life to brain cancer very shortly after diagnosis, and we are determined to do all we can to change that. I extend my deepest sympathies to his wife Ellie, who's here today, and his daughter Amelia, and I would be honoured to meet with Ellie and the honourable member for Caerphilly to hear more of her and Owain's story. Just yesterday, I was here for a debate on less survivable cancers. I think these debates and the petition show how much progress on cancer matters to Parliament and the public. My honourable friend, the member for Mitcham and Morden, commented that debates on brain cancers are a little bit like buses, having none for ages and suddenly 3 at once. But what I would like to do is acknowledge how her efforts and her work has led to the higher profile for these debates in Parliament and more of them coming forward. And I thank and commend her for her efforts in this field. Mr Chair, my honourable friend raises incredibly serious issues about how informed consent, tissue freezing and innovation are impacting patients. And I'll take these points in turn and primarily address the context in England, although I do acknowledge areas of this policy apply across the UK. On informed consent and tissue storage, as a cancer patient myself, I find it very troubling when patients say they haven't been informed about their tissue storage, as campaigners have reported. And I completely understand why the Owen's Law petition calls for people to be properly informed about the choices available to them. So let me be clear. Patients must always be fully informed about their rights, their options and their choices regarding the storage and future use of their tissue samples. The Human Tissue Authority was established in 2004 to oversee and licence organisations in the removal, storage and use of human tissue in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Under the 2007 Human Tissues Regulations, consent must be sought to collect human tissues and cells that are to be used in patient treatment. The Human Tissue Authority ensures compliance against these regulations as part of their standards, inspection and licensing regime. Consent should be sought in line with the suitable treatment options available to individual patients, which would be determined by their clinicians. This requirement extends to the collection of tumour samples that are to be used as the starting material in the manufacture of cancer vaccines. The government expects establishments to be held to the highest standards to ensure appropriate and ethical use of human tissue. I understand that my honourable friend, the member for Caerphilly, is meeting with the Human Tissue Authority to discuss this matter further, and I know that he will keep me closely in the loop on that. Owen's Law also asks for every NHS hospital to freeze suitable brain tumour tissue to allow patients to benefit from emerging cancer treatments. Individual pathology services in England have their own processes known as standard operating procedures for fresh freezing of tissue samples. And NHS procedures mirror local capabilities, which means the capacity for fresh freezing often depends on the availability of neurosurgery services in the local area. The human tissue regulations were introduced due to concerns that pathologists were retaining human tissues without appropriate consent. Any changes will need to be carefully considered by the government. However, I am happy, as requested by the honourable members for Caerphilly and Strangford, to liaise with the devolved governments on this issue. And I will commit today to further exploring the current arrangements for freezing tissues and the options for change, particularly for brain tumour tissues. But beyond improving access to emerging treatments through freezing, we know the most effective way to improve survival from cancers, including brain cancers, is to catch them early. That's why we've agreed around £600 million of capital investments in diagnostics for this financial year. Over £100 million will go to histopathology services, automation and digital diagnostics to improve pathology laboratories. I will.
I'm apologising for challenging her assertion, but in the case of glioblastoma, it really doesn't matter how early you get it. Right. It's the same consequence. It's a stage 4 tumour that is going to kill you. Average life expectancy, 9 months.
Minister. I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and I note the clarification that she has made. With that in mind, however, we do know that it is important that we can diagnose all cancers as quickly as possible, and that the diagnosis of brain cancers is equally important in order to start treatment as quickly as possible. To this end, the Chancellor announced further investment in diagnostics at the autumn statement as part of a £6 billion capital investment to deliver constitutional standards. On genomics, I met just yesterday with the Chief Scientific Officer for Genomics to discuss how we make sure that the UK remains a world leader in genomics, which we are, and that we can apply genomics to improve cancer outcomes. Our investment in diagnostics and pathology, we hope, will mean that patients like Owain will access a greater range of treatment options in future. My honourable friend and Ellie are entirely right to raise the importance of innovation, Mr Weston, particularly in less survivable cancers like brain cancer. This government is proud to support the Rare Cancers Bill brought forward by my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West. Baroness Elliott is moving the bill for second reading on Friday next week in the other place. We will go even further to ensure all patients with brain cancer have access to cutting-edge clinical trials and innovation, life-saving treatments. As part of our action, the National Institute of Health and Care Research announced the pioneering Brain Tumour Research Consortium to accelerate research into new brain tumour treatments across the UK. And NIHR is backing the consortium with an initial £13.7 million, with more money to come this year. The world-leading consortium aims to transform outcomes for adults and children and their families who are living with brain tumours, ultimately reducing lives lost to cancer. As I confirmed yesterday, I'll write to the Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden in detail regarding access to funding, and I will seek our information and explore how we can make access to funding much clearer and much more transparent, and I'm happy to commit to do that today. Finally, I'm pleased to confirm that the National Cancer Plan for England will be published in just a few short weeks in early February. It will have a focus on rarer cancers, including brain cancer, and will include further details on how we will improve outcomes and work with stakeholders, such as the Tessa Agile Brain Cancer Mission, to do so. The plan will detail further action to speed up diagnosis and treatment in England, ensuring patients have access to the latest treatments and technology, and ultimately driving up survival rates. I'm happy to give way.
Shannon.
Comprehensive reply to all of our questions that we asked. I'd mentioned in my contribution, Mr Chairman, about the Queen's University and the Belfast Trust are doing a pilot scheme. I think what they're doing hopefully would be a benefit to England, Scotland and Wales. Is it something maybe the Minister could perhaps maybe ask our department, civil servants to take on board, please? We don't mind. Thank you. Minister.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. I'm happy to confirm that I will ask officials to look into that and get me some advice on that pilot and how we might have a conversation with them about what we could learn from them. So thank you. I thank the Honourable Member for raising that. Mr Weston, I want to close today by paying tribute to our late colleague and member of the Senedd, Hethin David. Through tireless campaigning, he brought Owain's story to the Senedd, and my honourable friend has now brought it to this place, and I thank him for that. And I look forward to working with him and other honourable members to make 2026 the year that we shift the dial for patients with brain cancer. Thank you.
Chris Evans to wind up.
In a speech where tears have been shed, it was good to hear the Minister's positive reply. I look forward to meeting with her and Ellie, where we can discuss Owain's case further. I also want to pay tribute to the member for Mitcham and Morden for the work that she has done on behalf of this. Again, from a position of great grief, she has tried to bring something good about, and I think we can all endorse what she has been trying to do in her campaigns. I'm also pleased that the Minister has committed to meeting with the devolved administrations, because if one thing comes out of this debate is that cancer is no respecter of age, where we live, or boundaries. It affects everybody, and we need a national effort to do that. And I am really pleased with the Minister's response. I thought it was very positive. I look forward to working with her and all other members in providing the hope that we so desperately need in cases like these. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered patient access to tissue freezing for advanced brain cancer treatment, diagnostic and research. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is now suspended until 11 o'clock.